This is Duke University.
Okay, well, it looks like people are here, so let's go ahead and get started. Yay, thank you all for coming. And we are excited to have some time today to think about the PM journey. So my name is Erin Carlini, and this is a joint collaboration between Engineering Master's Programs Career Services and also the Duke Career Center. And today I have the lovely pleasure of introducing Xin Tian, and she is a Duke junior, and she is majoring in statistics, neuroscience, cultural anthropology. And she's going to serve as our awesome moderator today. She also is the writer of a really cool series that you can find on Duke Career Hub called the PM series. And so since you're all here, I encourage you all to check that out and to see what she's sharing with you through the Duke Career Hub. Xin Tian, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Erin, and thank you everyone for joining us today. So before we get started, I would like to remind everyone that this session will be recorded, and the structure of today's session is that we'll have a main panel discussion for maybe 30 to 40 minutes, followed by a 15 to 20 minutes Q&A at the end where you can ask your own questions to our lovely panelists. So first things first, let me just briefly introduce our panelists today. So first up, we have Andy here with us. And Andy is a Duke alumnus in the Masters of Engineering Management program. And he was the president of Duke MEM's Product Management Club. And since graduation in 2020, he has been, and here I quote, a PM at DocuSign by day and amateur astronomer by night. So here's Andy. And then our second panelist is Catherine. She is a senior at Duke studying economics. And throughout her undergraduate career, she has been involved in campus enterprise, business-oriented women, and other exciting ventures. She has interned at and will be returning to Cisco as a product manager after graduation. So congratulations, Catherine. So now I shall invite our panelists to share more about their journey very soon. But before that, I'd like to also invite our audiences to message your questions in the chat anytime during the panel discussion. And they can be about the process of recruitment, the internship, or like long-term career development, among other things. So yeah, you can just type them in the chat anytime, and we'll be monitoring the chats. And in the end, you'll have a chance to ask them your questions. So, okay, is everyone ready to get into it? Give me a thumbs up if that's all right. Okay, awesome. Thank you. All right, so to our panelists, Andy and Catherine, could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey to PM? Anyone could start.
Sure, I can go first. So I am a senior in Trinity studying economics and markets and management studies. Originally, I'm from right outside of Washington, D.C. And when I was in high school is when I first realized that I had an interest in business and marketing. I was part of an entrepreneurship capstone during my senior year. And that was my first experience, like building a product from the idea to the prototype to manufacturing the first round of inventory. So throughout the process, I found that I was most interested in finding product market fit and understanding the customer. When I came to Duke, I worked with CE and Bo, business-oriented women. Bo helped me get a lot of general information about the business world and figure out what I did and didn't want to do. And there was also a lot of guidance with cover letters, resumes, which helped me in my recruiting process. And then with Campus Enterprises, I got to run my own business. So that helps me further understand how to work with customers and figuring out features. So now, like it was said, I'm going back to Cisco full time. I interned last summer as a business analyst and knew I didn't want to go back in the same space. So I came back to school not sure if I was going back. I did some recruiting with different companies and interviewed with a few before getting an offer from Cisco to join in a different area. So I'll be going back working in customer experience, go-to-market strategy, which basically means I'll be helping them figure out how to bring new offers to market, working on the incubation phase of the product development.
Hey everybody, nice to meet you all. Yeah, I'm Andy. I'm originally from Bangalore, India. I'm an engineer turned product manager. So I switched to product management through my master's, but I was a hardcore engineer. I thought I'd loved coding, just being an introvert and code all day long, but that very soon turned out to be false. I was involved in a couple of startup initiatives as well back here. And I figured out that there's more to my career aspirations than just being an engineer and coding all day long just by myself. I like to be in the problem and not in the solution. I started exploring various career paths that I can leverage my skills and what I'm really good at. I figured that I was very good at leadership, and I can define a vision and march a team towards it. So I tried to marry my skills with what I already had. And I figured that business was something that was very distant from my area of sphere of influence. And I figured that by doing a master's degree, specifically focusing on product management, I'll be able to fill in my knowledge gaps and have that people skill also come into play with my technical background with my business skill. And I thought I'll be a great fit for product management. Yeah, Duke was a great period of my time, period of my life. I enjoyed my coursework. I also got plenty of opportunities, such as being MEM Product Management Club, to participating in various events in and outside of classroom. I was fortunate enough to land an internship with DocuSign as a product manager intern over the summer of 2020. I had a great time there. The team was amazing. The products that I was building was really cool. Without further thought, I came back full time. And currently I'm working as a product manager on the APIs and the core real estate product. So it's been quite a journey. Happy to be here and excited for the session.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine and Andy. Yeah, that's really cool. And I love how, Andy, you mentioned about I want to be in the problem and not in the solution. That's, I guess, something really unique about PM. So we could potentially explore that a little bit later. I'm sure some questions has already bubbling up among the audience, but I think one common question that we all have is, in order to get to the sweet spot of PM, we have to go through recruiting. So could you share a little bit more about, your experience recruiting for PM, and what were some challenges you faced, or something that you wish earlier, that some tips that you can give to everyone?
Yeah, I could take that question and pass it on to Catherine. Yeah, it was definitely a challenging time, especially with COVID last year around. Class of 2020 was something that was completely unanticipated. There were definitely hiccups along the way. I got an internship with another company, but later just got the offer rescinded in the peak of March, when there were layovers and there were layoffs, and people didn't have any clue what they were doing, and the world was just reacting very rapidly to COVID. That's when I really figured what's in my control and what can I do versus what's out of my control. And this is something that the world is facing. So I just try to control what's under what I can do. And I try to leverage my connections that I had built over time to help me land some referrals or even interviews, and actively started pursuing opportunities where I can directly leverage my skill set more than the aspirational role that I wanted to be in. I knew that I was technically sound any day, and a role like a technical product manager would be the easiest way for me to enter product management, was what I figured. So I started applying to the roles which were more technical in nature from the job description. And sure, that started working out for me. But later on, I figured that by the time the COVID had sort of settled down in a month's time, It was late April when I started applying for more broader roles, which were more business oriented, which were more platform oriented and things like those. And I again started finding a bit of success along the way. And DocuSign was one of the offers that I got. But the tips that I would just have is building connections just made all the difference, especially during the time where the world was taken aback with COVID and nobody knew how to react. And the second tip that I would give is projects, side projects, and activities and leadership. That is something that's very key to making a strong case for being a product manager. Leadership, it's something that I think it's the most underrated skill for being a PM. And yeah, those are some of the tips that I just highlight here.
So yes, I had like similar experiences. For my recruiting process, I started out just by researching different opportunities I was interested in applying for. And I did this on LinkedIn, Handshake, just Googling, and then also going directly to companies' career sites for companies that I had interest in. And then the applications themselves were largely just like resumes and cover letters. And then in the interviewing phase, I found that they started with like a phone screen by a recruiter. And then if that went well, you would move on to either case-based interviews, product interviews, or behavioral interviews, depending on how the company structured their recruiting process. So a challenge that I faced, I think, was that I hadn't started preparing far enough in advance because I wasn't 100% sure that product management was like necessarily the thing I wanted to go into. I was still considering some other areas like marketing or going back to a different business analyst position. So as a result, when I would get notified that I had an interview like later that week or the next week, when that happened the first time, I felt like I didn't have enough time to prepare. And if I like could go back, I probably would have started a little sooner by like reading some of the books that they have out there on how to do a really good product interview. But they did give me materials to prepare with. They sent like a video example, and there's also a lot of stuff that can be found online.
Thank you both. Yeah, those are, I believe, very common challenges that we are facing during the recruitment process. And Andy, just to follow up, for you, like which part of the recruitment process was, I guess, the most challenging, and how did you sort of find a way to navigate that?
Yeah, the most challenging part, in my opinion, was the role in itself generally requires you to have significant years of work experience, and to make the case that a kid out of school can still be a good PM was sort of the hardest part, I guess. It is very subtle and people don't really notice it, but that was sort of why I figured that I was not landing as many interviews as my peers who had work experience in related domains. So the way that I just made up for that was taking up side projects, working with Duke Bass Connections. Duke has so many amazing resources. I was also actively involved with Duke I&D. There were a couple of founders who were working on a startup idea, and I was always found a startup, so I just volunteered to work for their product. And got some very good first-hand feedback, and their product even launched. So it was not anymore a project. So when you can successfully make a project to a product, that will really make you stand out. And that's the success ratio of converting your side project into a product is very rare. And I did several of those side projects, which turned out to be very good, and a couple of them were very successful. So I was able to make my case that I can still deliver value, even if I'm just getting outside of school right now. And I was able to make up for the lack of experience that these roles required, especially PM roles. Most of the PM roles require 3+, 5+ years of experience.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Actually, that leads perfectly to my next question, which is, what are some of the campus activities and resources that helped prepare you for your job or your recruitment? How was your experience with it? And, do you know any other opportunities that you would recommend us to take part in while in Duke?
Sure. Yeah, as I just mentioned, the product management club was a really cool place to hang out all the time. There were side projects that you could partner with startups, and RTP is a great area where there are some very good startups that you can just volunteer, network, and even just speaking to actual product managers will help you catch their jargon and talk their language. So just networking with them is one thing that I would recommend, not just inside of Duke, but even just going outside of Duke in the RTP area. I still get alerts for meetups in the RTP area. I was an active participant before the world was shut down for COVID. So I would go there and actively network with people. That really helped. Speaking of resources within Duke, Duke INE was definitely a very good place to start. They really force you to think from a first principles approach. Even if you don't have an idea, you could still just go there. Howie Ree was just a great, fantastic resource. He helped us brainstorm, and because you meet people from all aspects of life and different backgrounds, not just engineering, biomedical, mathematics, and whatnot. I even had I even met a founder who was from linguistics background, and it was just so cool to see that ideas can come from all different domains, and just brainstorming with them will really help you broaden your perspective, understand what is the segment they're running behind, and how can you really develop that product mindset in the first place. And another resource was just your peers at different universities. People generally don't consider peers from other universities to be very friendly, but if you have your high school friends who went to, let's say, another school and who's also looking for a similar product management role, try to mock interview prep with them. That'll really broaden your perspectives, because if you mock interview prep with your own friends, they generally take the same coursework as you do, and their thinking will be pretty similar to how you think. So I was actively mock interview preparing with friends over at Dartmouth, Columbia, Cornell, who were in a similar boat as I. We just met on LinkedIn, and that was another resource that helped me broaden my perspective and make a good case, especially for recruitment. Yeah, because you meet strangers and you are forced to put yourself on the spot, and you don't know what question is coming. So that's just forcing yourself to be in the driver's seat.
Yeah, I would echo that. INE at Duke has been a great resource. I'm not part of that certificate as an undergrad, but I'm in a class right now, which has been a cool experience for learning about product development. It's called New Ventures, if anyone is interested. I know that it's offered for undergrads and grads. And then other resources like Business Oriented Women, which is an undergrad club, had a lot of resources through different workshops they would host on like resumes and cover letters and how to do a good behavioral interview. I worked with the Career Center some on one-on-one meetings to get feedback on cover letters and make sure I was really understanding like how to do it. That was earlier on in my internship search. And then lastly, I would say like the alumni network at Duke. I mainly tapped into this through LinkedIn just by searching for companies that I was interested in applying for, and then seeing if any of their current employees went to Duke and reaching out and setting up a bunch of networking calls just to learn more about the company and what their experience there has been like.
Yeah, thank you both. Seems like there are a lot of resources in Duke, especially like in the INE department. I personally worked with Howie as well, and he has been like immensely helpful and really, I guess, opened up my train of thought. So I think both of you mentioned about the importance of networking. So I guess I'm just curious about, when you network, what do you pay attention to? Like, what is the purpose of networking, and how's your experience like? What are some networking tips that you can give to everyone here?
So usually when I go into like a networking call, I don't go into it with the mindset of like what I can get from this person, which I feel like is something that a lot of people commonly do that can be a mistake. Also, waiting until like the last minute to start forming relationships with people can look superficial. So like reaching out earlier on rather than while you're in the thick of recruiting can be very useful. And I just try to get to know them and their experience and what they like and dislike about their current job, what their responsibilities are. I think it's a good way to learn about what different types of jobs are like, because also something that has the same title can be very different at two different companies. And I try just, yeah, to get to know them as a person and not take everything that they say as like, oh, this is their experience, that would be my experience, because I know that we're two different people that could have very different experiences, but just taking like what they say into account when I'm writing cover letters in order to make it more like personalized to the company, and also asking for any advice they would have for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely echo with Catherine's thoughts there. Yeah, that was a mindset shift. Quite honestly, you always go there with if you get on a call with a person that you want a referral, that will cloud your judgment to have an honest conversation with them. You will always just be thinking about the outcome. Hey, will they refer me? Will they not? Did the conversation go well or not? So I think you should just leave the referral behind and be more proactive in nature. Don't be reactive. If there's a job opening, let's say in Cisco or DocuSign, don't reach out then for a referral. That's when it becomes very reactive. Rather, see who has an interesting career path and be proactive in nature. Even if there's no job openings in their company, genuinely understanding their career path. And once you have developed this relationship, even when there was no job openings in their company, and let's say there's a job opening in sometime in the future, it's just a message away. You don't even have to break the ice and become all awkward if you want a referral. So I just recommend that be very proactive in nature. Reach out to people who you think would make more sense in the future, where you see yourself in such companies, and build relationships early along. And to Catherine's earlier point of Duke Alumni Network, it's the easiest, lowest hanging fruit that you can ask for. Duke alumni are spread across the globe, across industries, across cities, and they're super, super helpful. So just tapping into the network will just go a very long way. Just telling that, hey, I'm a code Yuki in the email invite or even the connection, they'll pretty much accept. I've never seen a person not accept if I just put the tag that I'm a Yuki as well. So yeah, I would just say that networking is something that is very unique to every person. It's not something that if it is defined by an outcome, then everybody would just march towards a common way. So it just is very unique to the person that you're speaking to the timing, and of course, what you want out of the call. Even I network, even now, I never stop networking because I actively learn about different industries and mentors. You find mentors and you find very interesting people along the way. So don't consider networking as something that you'll want to do only for jobs. Rather, it's about the relationship building and seeking mentors. And I'd recommend that you should never stop meeting new people and interesting people. You never know that may open another door for you in the future. So even if you have a job, just keep on meeting new people and develop those relationships along the way.
Yeah, thank you for those incredible advice. There needs to be a mindset shift for me as well. And yeah, Duke Alumni Network is very strong. If not, this session would also not happen. So thank you both again for joining us. So now I'm gonna shift gear from sort of the recruitment process to the role of PM. So my next question is for both of you, since you have already gotten a taste of PM, whether it's working full-time or interning, what do you think, like in your opinion, what is a good PM, and what does your company value in a PM?
I think that's a very, very broad question. It's like, what is to be a good person? Could be anything. It really depends on the company, the industry, the team also, and the kind of product manager you are. Product managers come in all flavors and sizes and shapes and industries. You could be a product manager on the platform team and be very technical. You could be a business product manager. You could be a technical product manager. You could be in a B2B industry versus a B2C industry, and things change very, very rapidly. You could also be in a very different organization, like Google or Microsoft is a very heavy engineering driven org, but let's say a Facebook or an Instagram is a very design driven org. It has nothing against product managers, but every organization inherently has a dominating organization and drives their strategy. So you'll have to really figure out what domain do you really fit in and what industry do you really fit in, and what are your skill sets that you can match. But specifically speaking about my experience here at DocuSign, I wanted to sit in a place where I can get a taste of both B2B and B2C, because I was not really sure what really interests me. I've seen people tell that, hey, earlier in your career, you should aim for B2C companies and then move on to B2B companies. But I've heard conflicting perspectives as well. So I figured that instead of taking someone else's advice, let me just jump right in and figure out what suits my interests in the first place. So I'm in this role where I'm sort of a B2B2C, where my product's users are another business, but the end user of the product would be a customer or a consumer who's completely retail. So sitting in this center point where you're required to think from both different perspectives is really stimulating, and it's very rewarding in my opinion. And also really depends on the organization. For a company like Facebook, I don't know, it's like half of the world is on Facebook. So customer acquisition doesn't even make sense for them. It's about making money, monetization. It trickles down top to bottom. But for a company like DocuSign, which is fairly in its teenage years, for us, growth is what we are looking at. So even if we bleed money, we want to acquire new customers and expand. So that is sort of a vision that trickles from top to bottom. And you still have more leeway as a product manager to define your own strategy, which is a very bottoms up approach about what features you want to ship and prioritize, and what do you think will add value to the customers in the real time, and how do you upsell and cross sell, and all of those aspects in between. So there's definitely a dynamic of the company's vision, which domain you're in, and what team you're in, and what skills you have. So it's really hard to tell how is it to be a good product manager. But what I can tell is there are skills that can be used across the board, be it in any domain, or domain agnostic, or even career level or agnostic. Something is leadership skills, being a good communicator, problem solving skills will go a long way. Yeah, some of these skills is what probably will make a good PM irrespective of the domain.
Yeah, so I haven't worked directly in the product team yet at Cisco. That I was on a different team last year, so I probably don't have as much to add here. But one thing I know that was really highlighted during my interview process and something they were looking for was like the ability to work cross-functionally, which is also like a huge buzzword right now that's been thrown around a lot, especially in like the tech industry, I think. So basically by that, they just mean to be able to like manage different stakeholders in different areas and communicate effectively and make sure you're framing everything to the correct audience is something that they were looking for.
That's really cool. Yeah, PM seems to be, well, that's what gives PM the charm, I guess. It's a very complex and very, jack of all trades almost role. And actually for Catherine, because just now you mentioned that, you were originally interning at a different team, and then you realized that, oh, this might not be the most suitable for me, and transferred to PM. So how was that process like, and how did you know that, PM might be a better fit?
Yes, so during my junior year when I was applying to internships, I was pretty set that I wanted to go into a marketing internship. And it's no secret that at Duke, a lot of people are in finance and consulting, and those timelines are very early on. So I was feeling pressured by that, which in hindsight was maybe not the best thing, but I was applying very early on to a lot of roles and didn't hear back from any of the marketing ones until way later, like March or even later. And I applied to one non-marketing internship, which was the business analyst role that I ended up accepting. And so in this role, I liked everything about it. Like I liked the job, I liked the people I was working with, but I just didn't think it's what I wanted to do long term because I wanted to be somewhere where I could be working more with the product and possibly like the messaging and the marketing. And this is something I was transparent with the intern co-leads at Cisco. And so when I wasn't going to go back to my team, I left on the last day not knowing if I was going to go back at all. So I just continued recruiting with other companies and interviewing and things like that. And one of the intern co-leads reached out to me saying that there was an opportunity on a team that is like the go-to-market strategy team. And based on my resume and my interests, they thought it was going to be a good fit. So I had a few conversations and then a few interviews with people from that team and ultimately decided to move in that direction.
Wow, thank you for sharing your experience. That's what's really helpful. Just for a little change of pace, now I'm gonna ask you some like quick fire questions. So very short answer. Okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being like strongly disagree, 5 being strongly agree, how would you say that your role offers a good like work-life balance? I guess this is more for Andy.
I would put it at 4.
4.
PM in itself is very challenging. It's very draining, but my company definitely does a very good job of striking a balance. Yeah, so I'd put it at 4.
Okay. Next question. In one word, what is a skill, or actually in one skill, what is the skill that you use almost every day?
For me, I'm just repeating myself. It's leadership. I can't stress enough. It's just leadership at the end of the day, and concise communication and leadership. Yeah, if they are 2 skills, I had to speak with one of the VP of products. I had to summarize what I had done in 6 months to him in 15 minutes. So clear, concise communication is something that's very important, and leadership, of course.
Right. Okay. Maybe I will ask one more question before we turn the stage to the audience Q&As. And you know, if you're listening and have questions as well, please feel free to jot it down or send it in the chat. Yeah, so that we can you know, get the ball rolling later during the Q&A session. So my last question for the main session is that what was a piece of good advice that you have given or received regarding like PM career or PM recruitment? Take your time to think.
I think one that I got for recruiting was to really understand the company to the best of your ability and what their mission is, and to like bring all your questions back to that, especially during product interviews when they're asking you things like, if we wanted to go into the healthcare space, what would we design? And just thinking about that through the lens of their mission is a really good way to answer questions.
Yeah, one advice that I got from my manager was you have to learn to say no. Otherwise, you'll just be overwhelmed with work all the time, and every team is just draining your energy. And I'm having a hard time saying no, just quite to be honest here. And my manager is helping me through that. So one advice that I got was you have to learn to say no and cut off at one point. you just have 24 hours and you just have limited energy, and you have to focus on the top priorities in your list. So that's one advice in the industry, is to learn to say no.
Yeah, thank you for your really insightful answers. So now I would like to open up the floor for our audience members. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question, or you can send it in the chat, and we'll help you to ask your question as well. And we would love to see more of your lovely faces if you're asking a question or just in general. Yeah, so Stacia here will be helping us like monitor the chat.
I have a question. So, Andy, I think you mentioned something about B2B and B2C businesses, and what does that mean exactly? I wasn't sure what that meant.
Yeah, for sure. When I mean by B2B businesses, it's your consumer is another business. For example, Salesforce, as an end user, you wouldn't use Salesforce, but Salesforce, companies like other companies like Microsoft, Google would definitely use Salesforce, or even Facebook would use Salesforce. But on the flip side, what I mean by B2C is your end user is a consumer, like a retail consumer. You use Facebook, you use Instagram, which is a consumer facing product. And the strategy and the way you define features varies a lot. They're very different domains and requires very different skill sets.
Okay, cool. Makes sense. This what are the different skill sets between B2B and B2C? I mean, I guess, is it easier for B2B to just have a clearer like idea of what the client wants if it's like just?
Yeah, there's definitely the trade-off if you're a B2B company, where it generally happens, and I've spoken to multiple B2B PMs. It so happens that your top 15% of your customer base dictates 80% of your revenue, because they'll just be so huge sometimes, and they tend to dictate what they want. And to your point, it becomes very apparent that they would force what features they want. And at that point, you really start to question, am I a product manager, or are we a services company at this point? We're just building features what they want. But it's again a good exercise to think through prioritization and what makes the most sense, and if there is value for your company at the same time. But on the flip side, for a B2C company, there's literally no boundary to what is possible. And you have consumers from all different backgrounds and all different perspectives and all different geographies. So really have to define a customer persona and go after a single persona and be successful there. Like Instagram cannot build features for, I don't know, like a mid 40 person, right? It's generally tailored for teenage to mid 20s. So you really have to understand their behavior, and it's a very user focused, user research driven, very heavy design driven approach. And there are chances to go wrong. With B2B, it's not the case. Like, for example, for times during pandemic, B2B companies will go bankrupt overnight if consumers stop using your product. But on the flip side, B2B will still be very successful irrespective of what happens. And the way B2B moves is very slow. There are stark differences, but some of the notable ones are those. I know many B2C company, the layoff period that was in previous March was heavily hit in B2C industry and not so much in B2B industry, because you could still work remotely and use Salesforce, but you couldn't work remotely and use OpenTable, right? OpenTable, its business fundamentally got disrupted, or Kayak or Expedia, things like these, which is very consumer driven, are generally prone to outside events more than B2B events. I mean, B2B companies.
That's an interesting point. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. We have 2 more questions coming up. So the first one we have is, do you know the general timeline for recruiting for PM internships? And is it too late to get something for this coming summer?
So I would say that there isn't a general timeline. It really depends the company you're looking at. Some of the bigger, like more established programs may have already like passed. Like I know I applied to a full-time position at Facebook in July and then interviewed like the beginning of this year. But then there were other companies that I applied to that I'm like still getting notified about because my application, I can't figure out how to withdraw. So I think there's like no set timeline. It's not like consulting where it's like basically by Thanksgiving, their recruiting season's over, especially if you're looking into a smaller company or a more like startup type company. They will be much more casual with the recruiting process and it might happen later on. They don't want to like take someone on and then not have them work for 3 months. They might wait until April or something like that, where they know that you'll be there pretty soon after.
Yeah, I would second Catherine's point. It really depends on the kind of role. These general APM programs that you see, which are super popular, they want to recruit way ahead of time and they are okay to wait for a year, but majority of the roles there, 90 to 95%, it's pretty much on demand. If there's a need in the business, they would open a job rec and they would want to join you pretty sooner than later, right? Probably the turnaround time would be 1 to 2 months. And if you're recruiting now for a role after you graduate next May, that may not be the place that you want to be in, and they don't want to wait for 6 months. They want you to come into the business and hit the ground up and running from day one. So these APM programs, and which are tailored specifically for students outside of who are graduating, they would definitely wait, and the season is probably as Catherine just told, it varies by company. Facebook has its own timeline. Google, I know there are a bunch of APM hiring companies. There's this website called as APM List, and they list all the APM roles available. So
Yeah, thank you. I have another question, I guess more relevant to Andy. So the question goes, what's something you wish you would have known or didn't expect from the PM role?
That's a good question. One thing that is coming to my mind is your job is not really appreciated. So that's a blatant truth, and you just have to deal with it, right? So you have to encourage everybody, all your engineers, and push through, but you don't receive the same feedback from your engineers. I've seen our engineers to be very, very introverted. If I'm on the call, nobody even turns on their video. You're like a random person just talking to a screen and you don't receive feedback. It's not just that. Even moving forward, apart from your manager, you get very little feedback and recognition. And if you are sort of a person who requires that motivation every 6 months and that push, and you don't get that, you deliver something, and if you win, the entire team wins, but if you fail, only the product manager fails. The team doesn't fail. So it becomes very hard in the longer run to go without appreciation. And that's something that I found the hard way around, that you deliver value, but still you don't get rewarded as much. So you'll have to understand that that's how it is. And the reward that is given generally by your manager and not by your peers as much. But I am a person who I'd like to showcase my engineers. If we ship a feature, I'd like to call out on their name and give a shout out, which doesn't happen the other way around. And expecting that is also quite wrong. So I learned that the hard way around, that it doesn't reciprocate all the time, and that's okay. And you should be okay with that. Being a PM, it's about draining your energy all the time sometimes. So that's something that I learned hard way around.
I see. It seems to be that a PM has to be like very self-motivated to actually like deliver a product and go through various iterations. That's a really, really interesting insight. Thank you. I guess the same question could also be asked about the recruitment process. So for Catherine, have you did anything surprising happen, or what did you learn like from the recruitment process?
Something that was surprising was how different the recruiting process was for different companies. So for Facebook, like I said, they had a very like structured process where you have like I applied back in July. I heard back, I think, in September. And then I did that phone screen. And then they had like a couple rounds of interviews after that. And those interviews were, each one had like a very specific focus. So they had like a product innovation interview and then an execution interview. And then I'm forgetting what the other one was. Or the first one was product sense, not product innovation. And then the last one was something about leadership. And so the way that that works is like they send you a guide and like how exactly they want you to prepare for their interviews. And that was just something that was kind of surprising, like how structured and specific their process was. Whereas other companies like Zillow and Cisco were not like that. So yeah, it's something that like your recruiting process will vary a lot based on the company.
Yeah, that's really good to know. Yeah, so I guess given, you know, this variability in the interview process, how did you prepare for them? And this can be for both of our panelists.
So I, like for the Facebook one, I really like went through their guide a lot, and they sent like a practice video, and I went through and like took notes to make sure I really understood what they were looking for specifically. I also did a lot of looking online for like resources and practice like product sense cases and practice execution case questions, just to make sure that I was going to be able to do what I had to do once I got to the interview. And then I just did a lot of practicing with friends and other people. I like what Andy said about finding other people that were recruiting for PM, because that's one thing that I didn't do. And the people I was like doing mock interviews with were all people that had been doing casing for consulting, which is not the same thing. So that's something that I definitely could have done better. So yeah, I would say like mainly figuring out what the company is looking for and being diligent and taking notes, and then just practicing as much as you can.
Yeah, one thing that I just add is, especially for these APM roles, there are specific Slack channels that pop up just around the time frame. I'm not sure if you guys know Lewis Lynn Slack channel. So there generally is a Slack channel just around the time when they're recruiting for PM roles, and they create an APM channel. There are APM alumni as well who just volunteer to help you out. And one pattern that I've seen is there are the set of people that you see that are interviewing for all of these companies are generally very, very similar. You see the same faces with interviewing for Uber APM, Facebook APM, Google APM, Salesforce APM. So you sort of develop that friendship relationship as well over time. But yeah, these Lewis Lynn Slack channel is something that's coming to my mind. And another one was Product School Slack channel. So there will pop up these channels that are very focused for a specific company. And the alumni who have graduated from the APM program or currently in the APM program will also help you prepare for those interviews.
Thank you. Yeah, this time, are there any other questions from the audience?
So I mean, I guess Andy, what do you do on a given normal day? What does your day look like? How much, I know you're working at like do you do much like coding or anything? Or is it mostly just communicating with like your engineers and I don't know. What's it?
Yeah, no 2 days are similar, unfortunately, at least for me. It's very, very unique. Sure, communication is a part of it, but it's not everything. One of the things that I do is really think through what should be done next. Brainstorming and really being the brain for your entire team is what you're required to do. It's something that sits at the core, and then everything revolves around it. There are two pieces. One is strategy of what you want to do for the product. everything with regards to pricing, revenue generation, cash flows, and everything which is forward looking. And this is other piece which is more executional in nature, about getting stuff done on a regular basis, unblocking regular bugs that come up. How do you triage them? How do you assign it to an engineer, which is going on a regular basis? And there's this other piece where you enable sales and solution engineers and your marketing team to go sell your product because you're the product manager. So I see this in 3 different buckets, working with UX researchers and designers and data scientists to really think through project revenues and making a business case and all of that, getting funding and really being the driver of the what should be done in next 6 months. So I can just give an example. I was just putting forth a business deck for one of my leadership calls, which I tend to launch next September. So that's 1 year out. So you really don't know as many variables that may just pop in and may just mess up your plans, but you really have to think through and develop a go-to-market strategy and things like those. And then currently working with your engineers, supporting them through the tickets, writing user stories and getting the features shipped. While you don't code anything, I just write some SQL queries to pull in some customer data. If it's very handy, unless it's too huge of a query, I ask my data scientist to pull it. But if not, if it's very snappy, I like to just do it myself. That's the only coding piece that I do. Yeah, so it's no 2 days are the same. It's very it varies by the season. It varies. So we ship features on regular cadences. So there are specific releases. So that time the priority becomes very different, and off seasons become very different. So it varies by time, by the day of the week, and even the product that you're on.
Okay, interesting. So is it basically, are you the one who's, I mean, you have to kind of figure out like exactly what to like, I mean, I guess it's not like you kind of have to figure out what to do on any given day, or like what the plan is. I guess like how defined are your like deliverables and executables and things you have to do? Is it kind of?
Yeah, definitely you're held accountable for what you achieve that quarter. So to just help us stay on track, we at least at DocuSign break it into agile sprints, so that you're staying on track, right? So that's another added responsibility. Some companies do have this additional role called as a program manager or a project manager who will help you through the way, or a product owner rather, who will keep you honest with the timelines and keep your engineering team on track. But at our company, we don't. So I act as a proxy project manager or a product owner or a program manager. We don't have we have a program manager, but they don't help us with keeping us sticking to the timeline. So what we generally do is we assign a scrum master within our own team. It could be an engineer, it could be my engineering manager, or it could be me, who will just keep us honest, pulling in tickets, and we follow our own methodology, sort of Scrumban, which is a combination of Kanban and Scrum, just whatever fits your team's needs. So that sort of keeps us on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, we don't really define what should be done by the hour, but we really define what should be done in a sprint. So if we get it done, we get it done. If not, we just push it to the next sprint and just move on, learn what went wrong, why did we not achieve what we thought we would achieve, and things like those. So you retroactively see what went right and what went wrong.
Okay, cool. So.
Yeah, thank you. We now have 2 related questions, so I'm going to ask them together. So the first one, it was mentioned that recruiters often look for 2 to 3 years of experience before you start a PM role. What type of experiences are they looking for? Must it be technical in the same field, or business in general, etc.? And another related question is for Andy. Like, how impactful or influential was your Duke MEM in your current role? So basically, what are recruiters looking for in terms of your previous experiences as skills, and how does your degree help in this process?
Yeah, to answer the former question, when they ask for a couple of years of experience, it's not that they want the number, it's just that they want to know that you have the right skill set. It's generally taken for granted that if you have 3 years of experience, you know the processes in place, and you know how to behave in a business setting, or you know how to work with different peers. So that's what they really look for when they mean 3 years of experience or 5 years of experience. It's more of a quantitative they put a number for the skill that they're looking for. That's how I see it. So if you can show the skill set without the number, that still goes a long way. If you work in teams, and if you work with different people from different backgrounds, and you're very cross-functional, and you take up responsibilities and take in charge of the role you're in, and if you can showcase such projects and successfully convert them into products, that can go a long way in masking what they require as 2+ or 3+ years of experience. That just worked for me. It's my perspective. But people do tell that, oh, you need to be a software engineer for these many years to be a PM at a software company. Sure, that's true, but that's not always the case. I know people who come from mechanical engineering background and land up a product manager role at Zoom or Microsoft and things like those. Sure, it may make a better case for you, but I don't think you should allow those things to completely dictate. There are definitely transferable skills that you can surface and use that to your to make your case. What was the second question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, you kind of answered the second question as well. Like how useful is your MEM degree in like your current role?
Yeah, if you know what exactly you want, it's definitely very, very useful. Duke has so many resources that you'd probably get overwhelmed at some point. Again, you just have to think like a product manager and select what is most appropriate for your needs. Specifically talking about MEM, the coursework that I took was really helpful. Design thinking and innovation, product management in high-tech industries, and things like courses like these were very, very helpful, which I use even now. Design thinking is something that I live by every day, and my work with UX researchers, and that's really helpful for me. On more of a broad perspective, I think we briefly touched upon resources like INE Club and Product Management Club and things, resources like these. I would always go and hang out at Fuqua during the Fuqua Fridays, just meeting people from different backgrounds. Generally, they would have experience and networking with them. So that also helped me a lot. So I would say Duke was definitely a very, very key component for me landing a job as a PM.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking at the time, it seems we have come to the end of the session. I know there might be still questions that are bubbling up, and I would encourage you to reach out to Andy or Catherine after the session to chat more. And for Andy and Catherine, if you feel comfortable, please feel free to leave your because the chat is closed, I guess, feel free to leave your contacts with me, and then I can follow up with the participants if they want to reach out to you. So before we close, is there anything else, like any last words that you would like to share with everyone today?
I just miss Duke. Enjoy your time at Duke. Once you graduated, product management, you land a job, but you won't come back to Duke again. So just have a good time.
Also, I would just say it all works out, and to not put too much pressure on yourself, because it will work out in the end, and there's no one timeline to getting a job or where you are meant to be. So
that's really heartwarming. Thank you both so much. And I would also love to thank the Pratt School of Engineering and the Career Center for organizing this event. And thank you for everyone for attending and asking really great questions and being really engaged. This has been a really, really great session. And just reminding everyone that this session is recorded, and it can be found in our next post in the PM series on the Career Center website. So please stay tuned for the recording as well as other resources that we will be posting. Thank you everyone again, and thank you Catherine and Andy for joining us. Yeah, so we will see you next time.